You feared us when we were kind. Now watch as we embrace our true nature. Part 1. Captain Zethkar of the Hegemony Council stared at the blue-green world spinning lazily on his command screen. Earth. The third planet from an unremarkable yellow star in a backwater system that had caused more political headaches than any world had a right to. Sir, the human delegation is requesting permission to board, his communications officer announced, her voice carrying the subtle tremor that all Hegemony crew members seem to develop when dealing with humans. Zethkar's forearms flexed involuntarily. Even after 3 years of serving as the Hegemony's official liaison to humanity, he still felt that primal unease whenever he had to interact with them directly. It wasn't their appearance that troubled him, though their bipedal form and forward-facing predator eyes were unsettling enough. It was something deeper, something that set every instinct screaming. Grant them permission, he said, settling back into his command chair, and have security teams stationed on decks 7 through 9. Sir, with respect, the humans have been nothing but cooperative for the past 50 years since first contact. Their technology sharing alone has advanced our medical science by centuries. Zethkar turned his primary eyes toward his young science officer. Veltara was brilliant, fresh from the academy, and like many of her generation, she had grown up hearing stories of human generosity rather than living through the early days of contact. Officer Veltara, you've studied their history files, correct? Yes, sir. Extensively. Their scientific achievements are remarkable, and their cultural development shows a clear progression toward peace and cooperation. Tell me about their wars. Veltara's confidence faltered slightly. Well, sir, they did have a period of global conflicts, but that was before they achieved spaceflight. Most species go through similar phases. Most species, Zethkar said slowly, do not systematically study the most efficient ways to kill their own kind for thousands of years. Most species do not develop weapons capable of sterilizing entire continents, and then build enough of them to destroy their planet dozens of times over. Most species, officer, do not treat violence as both an art form and a science. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of ship systems. Zethkar called up a holographic display showing various human cultural artifacts. Images of their entertainment filled the space between them. Movies depicting massive space battles, books celebrating warrior cultures, games where players commanded vast armies in conflicts spanning galaxies. Look at what they create for fun, he said. Other species paint landscapes or compose mathematical symphonies. Humans simulate war. They create fictional conflicts so detailed and complex that their military academies study them as theoretical scenarios. Veltara studied the images, her expression growing more troubled. But sir, they've been peaceful in all their dealings with us. They've never threatened any member of the Hegemony. No, Zethkar agreed. They haven't, and that's exactly what terrifies the Council. Before Veltara could respond, the transport docked with a gentle thud that vibrated through the ship's hull. Within minutes, the human delegation was walking through the corridors of the Hegemony flagship, their soft-soled boots making almost no sound on the metal deck plating. Ambassador Sarah Chen led the group, her graying hair pulled back in a simple style, and her clothes practical rather than ceremonial. She carried herself with the quiet confidence that Zethkar had learned to associate with dangerous things. Behind her walked Dr. James Morrison, the human xenobiologist who had revolutionized hegemony medicine, and General Patricia Hayes, whose presence always made Zethkar's security chief request additional personnel. Captain Zethkar, Ambassador Chen said as she entered the bridge, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Zethkar carefully shook the offered hand, still amazed by how much strength he could feel in those small digits. Humans were physically weaker than most hegemony species, but they had a compact efficiency that was somehow more unsettling than raw power. Ambassador Chen, I understand you wish to discuss the Council's recent decision regarding human expansion into the Outer Rim territories. The Ambassador's smile didn't reach her eyes. It was the expression Zethkar had learned to fear most from humans, the look that said they were thinking several moves ahead while pretending to focus on the current conversation. Actually, Captain, we're here to discuss something far more pressing. We've been monitoring hegemony communications and we're aware of the military buildup in the Centauri sector. Zethkar felt his heart skip in rhythm. The Centauri buildup was classified at the highest levels. I'm afraid I don't know what you're referring to, Dr. Morrison stepped forward, pulling out a small device that projected a detailed hologram of hegemony fleet movements over the past 6 months. The display showed the careful positioning of battle groups, supply lines, and communication networks that could only mean one thing: preparation for war. "We know about the Alliance of Free Worlds," Dr. Morrison said quietly. "We know they've been raiding hegemony shipping lanes, and we know the Council is planning a military response that will likely escalate into a full-scale conflict." "How could you possibly know?" Zethkar began, then stopped himself. Of course they knew. Humans had a talent for gathering information that bordered on the supernatural. General Hayes spoke for the first time since boarding. "Captain, for 50 years we've watched and learned. We've studied your technologies, your cultures, your military capabilities. We've been the helpful junior partners, contributing what we could while staying quietly in the background." "Yes," Zethkar said slowly, "and the Council appreciates—" "The Council fears us," Ambassador Chen interrupted. "We know that too. You're afraid because you've read our history. You've seen what we're capable of when we decide to fight." The bridge was silent now. Every hegemony officer focused on the conversation while trying to appear busy with their duties. Zethkar could feel the tension radiating from his crew. "But here's what you haven't considered," Chen continued. "Everything you've seen of human warfare, every conflict in our history that troubles your sleep happened when we were divided, when we were fighting ourselves, holding back, constrained by politics and nationalism and competing ideologies." She gestured to the holographic display of hegemony fleet positions. "The Alliance has been studying you too, Captain. They know about the buildup. They're preparing for war, and they're going to strike first soon." "How soon?" Zethkar asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. General Hayes checked a small device on her wrist. 18 hours. Maybe 20 if they stick to their current timetable." The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as officers began checking sensors and communications. Zethkar felt a cold certainty settling in his stomach. "What do you want from us?" he asked. Ambassador Chen's smile became genuine for the first time since boarding. "We want you to step aside, Captain. For 50 years you've feared us while we were still trying to be the good neighbors. You've seen us at our most restrained, most diplomatic, most human." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Now you're about to see what we become when someone threatens our friends. You feared us when we were kind. Now watch as we embrace our true nature part." To Admiral Kexthera of the Alliance of Free Worlds stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. 300 ships spread across 17 different systems, all positioned to strike simultaneously at hegemony infrastructure. It was the largest coordinated military action in galactic history, and it would establish the Alliance as the dominant power in this spiral arm. "Admiral, all fleets report ready status," her tactical officer announced. "We can begin the operation at your command." Kexthera nodded, her scaled hands clasped behind her back. The hegemony had grown complacent over the centuries, hiding behind their diplomatic protocols and trade agreements while the Alliance world suffered under their economic stranglehold. Today that would end. "Signal all fleets," she began, but was interrupted by her communications officer. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission. It's on an open channel, broadcasting to all ships in the fleet. Put it through." The main screen flickered, then cleared to show a human woman sitting in what appeared to be a simple office. She wore a dark blue uniform with no visible insignia, and her hair was pulled back severely. Behind her, Kexthera could see what looked like banks of monitors and control panels. "Attention, Alliance fleet commanders," the human said, her voice calm and professional. "My name is Admiral Lisa Park, United Earth Defense Force. I'm broadcasting this message to all Alliance vessels currently positioned for Operation Thunderstrike." Kexthera felt a chill run down her spine. Operation Thunderstrike was the classified code name for their attack. Only the highest-ranking Alliance officers knew it existed. "You're probably wondering how I know about your operation," Admiral Park continued. "The answer is simple. We've been watching. For the past 18 months, we've monitored every communication, tracked every ship movement, and analyzed every supply requisition related to your planned attack on hegemony infrastructure." The bridge of Kexthera's flagship had gone completely silent. Around the fleet, she knew, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of ships as Alliance commanders realized their most sensitive secrets had been compromised. "Now, before you start checking your security protocols or hunting for spies, let me save you some time." We didn't infiltrate your networks. We didn't bribe your officers. We simply listened. Admiral Park leaned forward slightly. You see, while you've been planning this war, we've been developing technologies that make your current communication systems look like children playing with string and cans. Kexthera turned to her security chief. Cut the transmission. Jam all frequencies. I'm trying, Admiral, but the signal is somehow bypassing our electronic warfare systems. It's like they're broadcasting directly to our screens without using our receivers. On the display, Admiral Park smiled as if she had heard the exchange. Admiral Kexthera, I know you're trying to cut me off. Your technicians will find that impossible. Human technology has advanced considerably since our last official contact with Alliance worlds. How is she doing this? Kexthera whispered. We've also been monitoring your conversation, Admiral, Park said, somehow answering the question that had been spoken quietly on a bridge millions of kilometers away. Quantum entanglement communication arrays. Instantaneous transmission across any distance, impossible to intercept or block. We developed them about 10 years ago, but we've been keeping quiet about it. Admiral Park stood up, and Kexthera could see that she was taller than expected, with the lean build that humans seem to favor. Now let me explain your current situation. Your fleets are positioned to attack 17 hegemony systems simultaneously. Your plan is to destroy infrastructure, capture key installations, and force a quick surrender before the hegemony can mount an organized response. The tactical display behind Admiral Park lit up, showing an exact replica of the Alliance fleet positions. Every ship, every planned route, every target was marked with perfect accuracy. It's actually not a bad plan, Park continued conversationally. Quick, decisive, designed to minimize casualties while maximizing political impact. Very professional. There's just one problem. The display changed, showing new contacts appearing throughout the Alliance fleet formations. Ships that hadn't been there moments before were suddenly visible on sensors, emerging from what appeared to be empty space. Human stealth technology, Admiral Park explained. We've had ships shadowing every one of your fleets for the past 3 months. They've been collecting intelligence, monitoring your preparations, and waiting. Kexthera's sensor operator was frantically working at his console. Admiral, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the unknown contacts. These ships are larger than anything in our databases. How many ships? Kexthera asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Ma'am, I'm reading at least 50 new contacts per fleet. Conservative estimate puts the human force at over 800 vessels. Admiral Park seemed to hear this exchange as well. Actually, it's closer to 1,200 ships, but who's counting? The point is, Admiral Kexthera, you're outnumbered roughly 4-1 by a force that's been preparing for this exact scenario for months. Kexthera found her voice. What do you want, human? What I want, Admiral Park said, is for you to understand something about humanity that apparently hasn't been made clear in our previous interactions. For 50 years, we've been the helpful neighbors. We shared technology, provided medical advances, contributed to galactic culture and science. We did this because we believed in cooperation, in building something better than the endless cycle of conquest and domination that seems to define so many species. The display behind her changed again, showing historical footage from human wars. Ancient battles, modern conflicts, the devastating power of human weapons when fully unleashed. But cooperation requires trust, Admiral. And you've broken that trust. You've planned an attack on our friends in the hegemony. An attack that would destabilize this entire region and likely lead to millions of casualties. The hegemony has oppressed the Alliance worlds for centuries, Kexthera protested. We have a right to defend ourselves. You have a right to seek justice, Admiral Park agreed. You have a right to demand fair treatment. You have a right to diplomatic solutions. You do not have a right to start a war that will devastate inhabited systems. And you have a right to stop us. Admiral Park's expression became something that Kexthera would remember for the rest of her life. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was the calm, professional demeanor of someone who had made a difficult decision and was prepared to see it through. We have the responsibility to stop you, she said quietly, because that's what humans do, Admiral. When we see something that threatens innocent lives, when we see bullies picking on those who can't adequately defend themselves, we step in. It's not rational. It's not always smart. It's certainly not profitable. But it's who we are. The tactical display updated again, showing the positions of hegemony defense fleets. They were pathetically outnumbered compared to the Alliance force. clearly unprepared for the scale of the planned attack. "So here's what's going to happen," Admiral Park continued. "You're going to order your fleets to stand down and return to Alliance space. You're going to request formal diplomatic talks with the Hegemony Council to address your legitimate grievances, and you're going to do it in the next 60 seconds. And if we refuse?" Admiral Park's smile was warm and friendly, which somehow made her next words even more terrifying. "Then you'll discover what human warfare looks like when we're not trying to be diplomatic. You feared us when we were kind. Now watch as we embrace our true nature part." 3 Admiral Kexathara stared at the human admiral on her screen for a long moment, her mind racing through possibilities. Around her, the bridge crew waited in tense silence. In the tactical display, 1,200 human ships maintained their positions around the Alliance, fleets like predators surrounding prey. 60 seconds is not enough time to coordinate a fleet-wide withdrawal, she said finally. Admiral Park checked something off screen. "You now have 53 seconds. And Admiral, coordination won't be a problem. We've already prepared withdrawal routes for all your fleets. The data is being transmitted to your navigation computers now." Kexathara's navigation officer looked up from his console, his expression bewildered. "Admiral, I'm receiving detailed star charts with plotted courses for all ships in our fleet. The calculations are perfect, accounting for gravitational variables I didn't even know existed." "How long would it take our computers to generate those calculations?" Kexathara asked. "For this many ships across this many systems? Days, maybe weeks." On the screen, Admiral Park nodded. "Human quantum computers, Admiral. We can run calculations in minutes that would take your systems months to complete. We've had plenty of time to plan for every possible contingency." 45 seconds, came a voice from off-screen. Kexathara felt the weight of command pressing down on her. 300 ships under her command. Thousands of crew members looking to her for leadership. The Alliance worlds had been preparing for this operation for 2 years, had invested enormous resources in the hope of finally breaking free from hegemony economic control. "Admiral Park," she said slowly, "even if we withdraw, the underlying problems remain. The hegemony will continue to exploit Alliance resources while giving us minimal representation in the Council. Our worlds will continue to suffer." "That's true," Park agreed. "And those are legitimate grievances that deserve to be addressed. But war isn't going to solve them, Admiral. It's going to make them worse." The display behind Park changed, showing economic projections and casualty estimates. The numbers were staggering. Millions dead, entire planetary economies destroyed, trade routes disrupted for decades. "This war you're planning won't be the quick, clean victory you're hoping for," Park continued. "The hegemony has more resources than you realize, and they have allies you haven't accounted for. What starts as a surgical strike will become a grinding conflict that will devastate half the galaxy." "You seem very certain of that," Kexathara said. "We've run the simulations, Admiral. All of them. We've modeled every possible outcome of this conflict using data spanning the last 500 years of galactic politics. Want to know how many scenarios result in a better outcome for Alliance worlds?" "How many?" "0. Kexathara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "That's impossible." 30 seconds, the off-screen voice announced. Admiral Park leaned forward. "Admiral, let me ask you something. In all your planning for this operation, did you ever consider what would happen if it succeeded?" "Of course. The Alliance would gain independence and equal representation. Think bigger. The hegemony falls or is severely weakened. What fills that power vacuum? The Alliance doesn't have the infrastructure to maintain galactic trade. The outer systems fall into chaos. Piracy increases. Refugee populations flood the core worlds. Within a decade, you'd be facing the collapse of galactic civilization." The tactical display shifted again, showing trade routes, supply chains, and economic networks. The complex web of interdependencies that held galactic society together was more fragile than Kexathara had realized. "The hegemony isn't perfect," Park said. "They're bureaucratic, often unfair, sometimes downright corrupt. But they provide stability. They maintain the infrastructure that keeps billions of beings fed and housed and healthy. Destroy that and you doom far more people than you save." 20 seconds. Kexathara looked around her bridge. Her officers were watching her with expressions ranging from confusion to fear. They had trained for battle, prepared for glory or death in combat. None of them had been prepared for this impossible decision. What alternative do you propose? She asked. Admiral Park smiled, and for the first time it seemed genuinely warm rather than terrifying. Humans have been studying your situation for years, Admiral. We have some ideas. The display changed once more, showing detailed proposals for political and economic reform, gradual restructuring of council representation, new trade agreements, technological sharing programs that would benefit alliance worlds without destabilizing the overall system. These reforms would take decades to implement, Kexithara protested. Yes, Park agreed, but they would work, and they wouldn't require killing millions of innocent people in the process. 10 seconds. Kexithara closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her. When she opened them, Admiral Park was watching her with something that might have been sympathy. Admiral, Park said quietly, I know this isn't the outcome you wanted. I know you've invested everything in this operation, but sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when not to fight. 5 seconds. Kexithara straightened in her command chair, feeling the burden of command settle around her like armor. All fleets, she announced, her voice carrying to every ship in the Alliance force, and stand down. Return to assigned positions and prepare for withdrawal to Alliance space. Admiral Park nodded respectfully. A wise decision, Admiral. This isn't over, Kexithara said. The Alliance won't simply accept the status quo forever. I wouldn't expect you to, Park replied. But next time, try diplomacy before declaring war. You might be surprised by the results. The transmission ended, leaving Kexithara staring at a blank screen. Around her, the bridge crew began implementing the withdrawal orders with professional efficiency, despite their obvious confusion. Admiral, her tactical officer said quietly, the human ships are maintaining their positions. They're not withdrawing. Kexithara studied her sensors. The human vessels remained exactly where they had appeared, watching the Alliance fleets with what could only be described as patient vigilance. They're making sure we actually leave, she realized. Should we consider this a hostile act? Kexithara thought about Admiral Park's calm professionalism, about the detailed reforms proposals, about the terrifying efficiency with which the humans had detected and countered their entire operation. No, she said finally, consider it a promise. As the Alliance fleets began their withdrawal, Kexithara found herself wondering what other promises the humans had made, and to whom. For 50 years, they had been the helpful neighbors, the junior partners in galactic civilization. But today had revealed something different underneath that friendly exterior. Today, she had seen what humans became when their friends were threatened. She found herself hoping she would never see what they became when their enemies went too far. The withdrawal took 6 hours to complete. When the last Alliance vessel had jumped to hyperspace, the human ships simply vanished, returning to whatever dimensional pocket they had emerged from. But Kexithara knew they were still there, still watching, still waiting. The age of human diplomacy, she realized, was over. The age of human protection had begun. You feared us when we were kind. Now watch as we embrace our true nature part. The emergency council session had been in recess for 6 hours while the various species delegations held private consultations. In smaller chambers throughout the council complex, representatives debated humanity's ultimatum with growing urgency. The humans hadn't called it an ultimatum, but everyone understood the reality behind Admiral Chen's polite words. In the hegemony delegation chamber, Councillor Vexhai paced while his advisors reviewed intelligence reports that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of human capabilities. The deep space monitoring stations have been reporting anomalies for months, his military intelligence chief reported. Energy signatures that appeared and disappeared without explanation, gravitational distortions in empty space, quantum fluctuations that suggested massive industrial activity. We assumed they were sensor malfunctions. They were hiding entire star systems worth of military infrastructure, Vexhai said grimly. How is that even possible? According to our physics department, they've been using some form of dimensional manipulation technology. They've essentially been building their fleet in pocket universes connected to normal space through quantum tunnels. Vexhai stopped pacing. Our scientists said dimensional manipulation was theoretically impossible with current technology. Apparently, human scientists disagreed. Meanwhile, in the Trade Federation chambers, Councillor Meltara was reviewing economic projections that were equally unsettling. If the humans withdraw from galactic commerce, the economic impact would be devastating, her chief economist explained. They've become integral to supply chains across 40% of known space. How did we let ourselves become so dependent on them? Meltara asked. Their technology was simply superior in most areas. More efficient manufacturing, better transportation systems, advanced medical equipment. It made economic sense to integrate their capabilities into our infrastructure. And now we discover that their helpful cooperation was actually a form of strategic positioning. In the scientific consortium chambers, Counselor Zektos was dealing with perhaps the most disturbing revelations. Our research teams have been analyzing the sensor data Admiral Chen presented, his science advisor reported. The external threats appear to be real and far more dangerous than we initially calculated. How much more dangerous? The entity designated as the Shadow Fleet alone appears to possess enough firepower to sterilize every inhabited world in the galaxy. And there are at least 6 other threats of similar magnitude. Zektos felt his multiple stomachs churning with anxiety. Why haven't these threats attacked before now? Unknown, but the humans seem to believe that something has changed recently. Their military buildup has accelerated dramatically in the past 5 years. Similar conversations were taking place in delegation chambers throughout the complex. The warrior clans were trying to understand how humans had developed military technology that made their proud fleets obsolete. The agricultural consortium was calculating how quickly food supplies would collapse if human distribution networks were withdrawn. The artisan guilds were realizing that human cultural exchange programs had been intelligence-gathering operations. When the council reconvened, the atmosphere had changed completely. The casual dismissal of human capabilities that had marked the earlier session was gone, replaced by a wary respect that bordered on fear. Counselor Vexhai called the session to order and immediately yielded the floor to Admiral Chen, who had remained in the chamber during the entire recess, calmly reviewing reports on a portable device. Thank you, Counselor Vexhai, Chen said as she returned to the podium. I understand that the various delegations have had time to review the information we've provided. I hope this has helped clarify the situation. Admiral Chen, Vexhai said carefully, our intelligence analysis confirms that your assessment of external threats appears to be accurate. However, this raises the question of why humanity chose to keep this information secret for so long. Chen's expression became thoughtful. Counselor, let me answer that with a question of my own. What would have happened if we had announced 20 years ago that massive hostile forces were massing beyond galactic borders? The chamber was quiet as representatives considered the implications. Finally, Counselor Thekra spoke up.
Panic, political chaos.
Probably the collapse of several governments. Exactly. And what would that panic have accomplished besides making everyone easier targets for the real threats? So you decided to handle the situation unilaterally, Meltara said, her tone carrying a note of accusation. We decided to handle the situation competently, Chen corrected. Look around this chamber, Counselor Meltara. How many of the species represented here have the industrial capacity to build effective weapons of war? How many have the political stability to maintain a decades-long military preparation program? How many have the technological base to even understand the threats we're facing? The uncomfortable silence that followed answered the question more clearly than words could have. Chen continued, her voice taking on a gentler tone. This isn't about human superiority or desire to dominate. This is about practical reality. We're the only species in known space with the combination of resources, technology, and cultural psychology necessary to build an effective defense against these threats. Cultural psychology? Zektos asked. Most species achieve interstellar flight after they've moved beyond warfare as a solution to problems, Chen explained. You develop peaceful, cooperative societies that focus on science, art, and philosophy. It's actually a beautiful thing to observe. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Humans are different. We achieved spaceflight while we were still actively studying more efficient ways to kill each other. We brought our capacity for violence with us to the stars. And you see this as an advantage? Vexhai asked. Against enemies that want to exterminate all organic life? Yes, Counselor. I see it as exactly the advantage we need. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Admiral Chen, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't eventually turn these weapons against galactic civilization itself? Chen turned to see who had spoken. It was Counselor Stor of the Neutral Worlds, a species known for their careful diplomatic approach to all conflicts. Counselor Stor, what guarantee did you have for the past 50 years that we wouldn't turn our existing capabilities against you? Your existing capabilities weren't sufficient to threaten galactic civilization, weren't they? Chen asked. Counselor, human industrial capacity has been capable of destabilizing galactic economics for decades. Our technology could have rendered most of your defense systems obsolete years ago. Our intelligence networks could have manipulated your political processes whenever we chose. But did we? No, Stor admitted. The guarantee you're looking for, Chen said, isn't in our weapons or our technology. It's in our actions over the past 50 years. We could have been conquerors at any time. Instead, we chose to be gardeners. The metaphor hung in the air while the representatives absorbed its implications. Gardeners? HFY asked. We've been cultivating galactic civilization, Counselor, protecting it from threats, helping it grow stronger, making sure it develops in healthy directions. And when weeds try to choke out the garden, we remove them. The reminder of the Alliance crisis sent another ripple of unease through the chamber. Every representative understood that their species could be classified as weeds if they made the wrong choices. Counselor Meltara raised her hand. Admiral, if we agree to work with humanity as partners, what would that relationship look like in practical terms? Chen smiled, and for the first time that day it seemed genuinely warm. Much the same as it has for the past 50 years, Counselor. We'll continue to share technology and scientific knowledge. We'll continue to participate in galactic commerce and cultural exchange. The only difference is that you'll now be aware of the military protection we've been providing all along. And if we choose not to work with you as partners, the warmth disappeared from Chen's expression, then we'll continue to protect galactic civilization anyway. But we'll do it without consulting you first. The threats we're facing don't care about political sensibilities or diplomatic protocols. They only understand force. HFY looked around the chamber at his fellow council members. He could see the fear in their expressions, but also something else. Relief. For 50 years, they had been walking unknowingly along the edge of an abyss, protected by guardians they hadn't known existed. Admiral Chen, he said finally, I believe I speak for the Council when I say that we would prefer to work with humanity as informed partners rather than uninformed beneficiaries of your protection. Chen nodded respectfully. Then let's begin planning our mutual defense of everything we've built together. As the chamber erupted in discussion about new treaties and joint command structures, few representatives noticed that Admiral Chen's expression had changed. The diplomatic mask was still in place, but underneath it was something much more primal and determined. The time for hiding humanity's true nature was over. Now the galaxy would learn what they became when the gloves came off. You feared us when we were kind. Now watch as we embrace our true nature part. For 3 months after the Alliance withdrawal, the Galactic Council chambers buzzed with unprecedented activity. Representatives from over 200 species filled the massive amphitheater, their conversations creating a symphony of clicks, chirps, harmonics, and traditional speech patterns that the universal translators struggled to keep up with. Counselor HFY of the Hegemony stood at the central podium, his formal robes rustling as he gestured to the assembly. As the senior representative of the founding species, he had called this emergency session to address what many were calling the human question. Esteemed colleagues, he began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. We gather today to discuss events that have fundamentally altered the balance of power in our galaxy. The chamber fell quiet. Everyone present knew about the Alliance crisis, though details had been classified at the highest levels. What they didn't know was how to respond to humanity's sudden emergence as a major military power. 3 months ago, HFY continued, our intelligence services detected what appeared to be an imminent Alliance attack on hegemony infrastructure. Before we could mount an adequate response, human forces intervened and prevented what could have become the most devastating war in galactic history. A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. Many of the smaller species had been unaware of just how close they had come to galaxy-wide conflict. Counselor Thekra of the Mineral Union raised one of her crystalline appendages. Counselor HFY, while we appreciate humanity's intervention, many of my constituents are concerned about the implications. If humans possess military capabilities sufficient to stop an Alliance fleet of 300 ships, What does this mean for the rest of us? It was the question everyone had been thinking, but few had dared to voice. In the months since first contact, humanity had been the model junior member of galactic civilization. They shared technology freely, contributed to scientific advancement, and maintained peaceful relations with all species. But the Alliance crisis had revealed capabilities that had been completely hidden. Before Vexhai could respond, a new voice spoke from the human delegation section. If I may address the Council's concerns? Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the human section, wearing her diplomatic uniform rather than military dress. Behind her sat a delegation of humans, representing various governmental and military organizations that most Council members were only now learning existed. The chair recognizes Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force, Vexhai said, formally. Chen walked to a secondary podium, moving with the easy confidence that marked all human military officers. Thank you, Councillor Vexhai. Honorable members of the Council, I understand your concerns about humanity's military capabilities. You have a right to know what we've been building and why. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Every translator had stopped its background humming. Every species had ceased their characteristic nervous movements. The moment everyone had been dreading and anticipating had finally arrived. For 50 years, Chen began, humanity has been a member of galactic civilization. We've learned from you, contributed what we could, and tried to find our place among the stars. But we've also been watching and learning about threats that exist beyond the borders of civilized space. A holographic display materialized above the chamber, showing star charts of the galaxy with particular regions highlighted in red. Most Council members had never seen these areas marked with such detail. The Devourers in the Void Sector, Chen said, indicating one of the red zones. The Machine Collective in the far reaches. The entity we've designated as the Shadow Fleet that operates beyond the galactic edge. While you've been focused on internal politics and trade disputes, we've been preparing for threats that could end all organic life in this galaxy. Councillor Jektos of the Scientific Consortium spoke up, his multiple eye stalks focusing intently on the display. Admiral, our long-range sensors have detected unusual activity in some of these regions, but we've been unable to confirm any actual threats. That's because you've been using conventional detection methods, Chen replied. Human quantum sensors can penetrate dimensional barriers that hide these entities. We've been monitoring them for decades. The display changed, showing sensor recordings that made several Council members gasp in recognition and fear. Massive ships that seemed to absorb light itself. Mechanical constructs the size of small moons. Energy signatures that defied known physics. The Alliance crisis forced us to reveal capabilities we had hoped to keep hidden for several more decades, Chen continued. But since they're now public knowledge, you deserve to understand the full scope of what we've been preparing for. New images appeared, showing human shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, manufacturing facilities built inside hollowed-out planets, research stations positioned in interstellar space where no one would think to look. For 20 years, we've been building the largest military force in galactic history, Chen said matter-of-factly, not to conquer or control, but to defend against threats that would make the Alliance war look like a minor disagreement. Councillor Meltara of the Trade Federation stood up, her feathers ruffled with agitation. Admiral Chen, this massive military buildup was conducted without any oversight or approval from the Council. How are we supposed to trust that your intentions are purely defensive? Chen turned to face the Trade Federation representative directly. Councillor Meltara, in the past 50 years, has humanity ever broken a treaty? Have we ever used force to settle a dispute? Have we ever threatened any member species or attempted to expand our territory beyond the systems granted to us? No, Meltara admitted reluctantly. Our actions speak for themselves, Chen said. But if you need additional assurance, I invite you to examine our military doctrine and strategic planning. Everything we've built is designed for defensive operations against external threats. The holographic display shifted again, showing detailed schematics of human weapons and defensive systems. The technology was far more advanced than anything the Council had seen, incorporating principles that their best scientists barely understood. These weapons are specifically designed to counter the threats I've shown you, Chen explained. They would be largely ineffective against conventional galactic military forces. We're not building an invasion fleet. We're building a shield. Councillor Vexhai raised his hand. Admiral Chen, assuming we accept that your intentions are defensive, there remains the question of command authority. Who controls this massive military force? The United Earth Defense Force operates under a charter approved by every human government, Chen replied. Our primary directive is the protection of organic life in this galaxy. Our secondary directive is the maintenance of galactic civilization as it currently exists. And if those directives conflict? Chen was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. Counselor, in our history, humans have faced situations where we had to choose between following orders and doing what was right. We have a saying, just following orders is not an acceptable excuse for allowing atrocities to occur. The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber. Several species exchanged nervous glances, remembering their own histories and the times when authority had been used to justify terrible acts. What we're telling you, Chen continued, is that humanity will not stand by and watch genocide, slavery, or the destruction of civilized worlds. We will not allow external threats to destroy everything we've all built together, and we will not permit internal conflicts to escalate to the point where they threaten galactic stability. Counselor Thekra spoke again, her crystalline voice carrying a note of uncertainty. Admiral, you're essentially declaring humanity to be the protectors of galactic civilization. But who gave you that authority? Chen's expression became something that every military officer in the chamber recognized. The look of someone who had accepted a burden they never wanted, but couldn't refuse. No one gave us that authority. Counselor, we took it, because someone has to. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives tried to process the implications of humanity's declaration. In the space of one presentation, the entire political structure of the galaxy had shifted. Vex High called for order, but it took several minutes before the noise died down enough for him to speak. Admiral Chen, he said finally, what you're proposing fundamentally changes the nature of galactic governance. You're asking us to accept humanity as a military authority answerable to no one but yourselves. No, Chen replied. I'm informing you that humanity has already accepted that responsibility. What I'm asking is whether you'd prefer to work with us as partners or have us operate independently. The distinction, everyone realized, was crucial. Humanity wasn't asking for permission. They were offering cooperation. Commander Zex High of the Galactic Federation's Third Fleet had seen many strange things in his 40 cycles of military service. He had witnessed the crystalline warriors of Vega Prime dissolve entire planets with their harmonic weapons. He had watched the shadow creatures of the void sectors phase through solid matter as if it were mere air. But nothing had prepared him for what he was seeing now on the tactical display of his flagship. The human ship was small, barely a quarter the size of his heavy cruiser. Its design was primitive by galactic standards, with crude chemical propulsion systems and basic energy weapons that any first-year cadet would laugh at. Yet somehow this tiny vessel had just torn through an entire squadron of Kithra assault ships like they were made of paper. Commander, incoming transmission from the human vessel, reported his communications officer, her forearms trembling slightly as she worked the controls. The entire bridge crew was on edge. They had all heard the stories, but seeing it firsthand was different. Put it through, Zexhai ordered, his reptilian features grim. The hologram that appeared before him was surprisingly unremarkable. The human looked tired, with dirt smudged across his pale skin and dark circles under his brown eyes. His uniform was torn in several places, and there was dried blood on his knuckles. But his voice was steady when he spoke. This is Captain James Morrison of the UES Defiance. You're in violation of the Terran defense perimeter. Turn around now or we'll be forced to engage. Several of Zexhai's officers made clicking sounds of amusement. The commander himself might have laughed if he hadn't just watched this human ship destroy 6 Kithera vessels in less than 3 minutes. The Kithera were among the most feared warriors in the galaxy, their exoskeletons nearly impervious to most weapons, their reflexes enhanced beyond natural limits. Human, Zexhai said carefully. I am Commander Zexhai of the Galactic Federation. We are not your enemy. We seek passage to the Outer Rim to investigate reports of Kithera movement. The human's expression didn't change. The Outer Rim is off limits. We've been handling the Kithera situation. Handling it? Zexhai's tactical officer spoke up before he could stop her. Forgive me, Commander, but our intelligence suggests the Kithera have been pushing deeper into the galactic spiral for months. Entire systems have gone dark. How can one primitive species possibly? Captain Morrison's image flickered as he turned to look at something off-screen. When he looked back, there was something different in his eyes. Something cold? Lieutenant Torres, bring up the tactical display, Morrison said to someone on his bridge. Show them what we've been handling. The transmission expanded to show a star map of the local sector. HFY felt his blood chill as he saw the scope of what the humans had been facing. Red markers indicated Kythera fleet positions, and there were hundreds of them. Massive invasion forces that should have been able to roll over any defense, but the markers were all crossed out. Destroyed. And the timestamp showed they had all been eliminated within the past month. Impossible, whispered his science officer. The calculations don't work. Even with our most advanced weapons, a force that size would require the combined fleets of a dozen Federation worlds to defeat. Morrison's laugh was humorless. You're thinking like civilized beings. You build your weapons to disable, to capture, to achieve victory with minimal casualties because that's what civilized species do. You have rules. Honor codes, ethical guidelines. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was quieter but somehow more terrifying. We don't fight to win, Commander. We fight to survive. And when something threatens our survival, we become very uncivil. HFY studied the human more carefully. There was something in the way Morrison carried himself, a coiled tension that spoke of constant readiness for violence. But it wasn't the mindless aggression of a berserker. This was controlled, calculated, efficient. Your government, HFY said slowly. Surely they have oversight. Military protocols? Our government gave us one order when the Kythera first appeared in human space. Morrison replied. Stop them. By any means necessary. The bridge fell silent. In galactic military doctrine, such an order was unthinkable. There were always rules of engagement, protocols for prisoner treatment, limits on acceptable weapons. The idea of giving a military force complete carte blanche was barbaric. The Federation has strict guidelines about warfare, HFY said. Certain weapons are banned, certain tactics considered beyond the pale. Surely you understand. Commander, Morrison interrupted. Let me tell you what we understand. 3 months ago, the Kythera hit our colony on Kepler 438b. Population, 2 million. Men, women, children. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't even take resources. They just killed everyone and moved on. The human's voice remained steady, but something flickered in his eyes that made HFY's species' ancient predator avoidance instincts scream warnings. So we studied them. We learned how they think, how they fight, how they breed, and then we started killing them more efficiently than they could replace themselves. Morrison gestured to something off-screen, and the star map zoomed in to show the wreckage of a Kythera fleet. The destruction was absolute. No survivors, no escape pods, no quarter given. You want to know why humanity is the universe's final line of defense, Commander? It's because when something threatens our species, we don't fight fair. We fight to win, and we're very, very good at it. As if to emphasize his point, Morrison's tactical officer's voice came through the transmission. Captain, long-range sensors are picking up another Kythera formation. Bearing 27 Mark IV, estimated strength, 40 vessels. Morrison nodded without seeming surprised. Time to intercept? 18 minutes, sir. The human captain looked back at HFY. Commander, I strongly suggest you maintain position here. What you're about to see isn't pretty, but it's necessary. Maybe it's time the galaxy understood what we've been doing out here in the dark. The transmission ended, leaving HFY staring at empty space where the hologram had been. Around him, his crew waited for orders. But for the first time in his long career, the veteran commander found himself at a complete loss for words. Outside the viewport, the small human ship was already accelerating toward the incoming Kythera fleet, alone against impossible odds. And somehow HFY found himself feeling sorry for the Kythera.